financial metric. It could also be a process or an operating metric. So peel the onion a little bit more, get some more clarity.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the A Media House podcast, Simulated Reality. Today we have with us the CEO of LatentView Analytics, Rajan Sethuraman. Rajan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Kashyap, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be interacting with you today. We have been working with Analytics India magazine for some time now, and I like the next opportunity to talk about some of the things that are probably on top of minds for many people within the analytics space. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the kind words. One of the things, Rajan, we are going to talk about today is balancing innovation and client needs. And today in the world of Gen AI, I don't think this conversation has been more relevant considering the hype around Gen AI, but the number of projects that are still in POCs versus what clients are actually expecting and the ROI that they're expecting. I think it's a good conversation to have. It's always been relevant as a conversation, but I think it's even more relevant today. Uh, my first question to you is, how do you view this relationship between innovation and clients, right? So what are some of the perspectives or what are some of the conversations that you have to have with them, and how do you deal with them usually when it comes to the client coming and saying, you know what, hey, I want this, but you know what, probably in terms of where they are positioned as a business, that's not what they need, but so how do you have this conversation with them, the clients?
That's a very relevant question, Kashyap. And one of the things that we notice quite a bit is that while there is always this interest in trying out new things, being innovative, there is also this need for being grounded, right, in the business reality of clients' current context. And therefore, especially in a situation where budgets are tight and you're operating under resource constraint, there is always the need to make sure that every dollar that you spend has impact on the P&L, right, in some form or the other. So in that kind of a context, it becomes even more important, right, that while you are being innovative, you are also doing something that will have a real impact on the bottom line or top line of the company, right? And you're right that the decibel levels around the new things, in generative AI and large language models, it's kind of like at a peak right now, and more so because of the democratization that has happened in recent times, right? Through ChatGPT, everybody is now familiar with it, which means that there is also a little bit of that fear of missing out creeping in. If I'm not doing something in LLM, right, am I missing out? However, I think in the last 2-3 months, I'm starting to see some changes, at least in terms of client perception, in the sense that instead of just asking, let's get something underway and let's get something started, they're starting to ask questions more about how can I make meaningful use of generative AI or large language models or any other new technology for that matter, right? In this resource constraint scenario, we are hoping that the second half of this calendar year will be a little bit more relaxed from a budgetary standpoint, but that is not panning out, right, as we had hoped for. In some sense, clients and organizations are still walking a tightrope, right, when it comes to requirements. In that context, I think this becomes super important. So one of the things that we do, right, when it comes to innovation and new ideas is to try and sit down with the client and help them think through what is the specific metric you're trying to impact, right? It could be a financial metric. It could also be a process or an operating metric. So peel the onion a little bit more, get some more clarity, and at least set it up in that fashion, saying that, okay, we will do this initiative and we will attempt using Gen AI or LLMs, right, to improve the performance. But here are the metrics that we are targeting, right? And does it make sense to you? Are these metrics important in your current context and in the scheme of things? And if yes, then initiate a pilot and a POC. However, most such initiatives are still in pilot POC stages. I don't think there are too many full-fledged projects. Of course, you will find something in customer experience and customer interaction and so on, right? That is where NLP and NLG kind of technologies have been used in the past as well. And Gen AI is quite helpful on that front. But when it comes to hard data analysis, generating insights from a stack of data, a ton of data that is available, people are still figuring out how to marry the hard science and the math and the modeling with the Gen AI capability. So that's where I say organizations are at this time.
Yeah, it's interesting to mention that you make the client sit down and you help them understand. Listen. So these are the metrics that you were trying to achieve. When has it changed? Especially, and I have observed this with technology, right? Especially AI technologies that you know clients, especially, they seem to forget the matrix because they are also running a business in the end, right? They want to achieve their matrix. They have their KRAs set. Why is it that, especially with technologies, there is such a hype and everyone comes to you before there is a problem to implement a solution saying that, you know what, hey, I want Gen AI. Actually, is there a problem for, is there a right problem statement or a use case to solve the Gen AI? But why is that? Why is that the case, especially with technology? I mean, you've worked in the industry for quite some time. Can you help us understand why, especially technology?
Sure. Yeah, my hypothesis around that, Kashyap, is the pace at which technology is getting disrupted. Right. If you look at how that's been happening over the last couple of decades, we see that this whole introduction of a new technology, the hype cycle, and then getting to real impact and maturity, and then getting replaced by something else. That life cycle is getting shortened, right? With every passing quarter, I would say, right? New technologies now come up, and you need to be fairly quick in terms of how you understand the technology and the kind of impact it can have on your business, and quickly putting something in place, right? That will start leveraging. And obviously, the underlying fear there is that if I'm not on it, then I'm missing out, right, on competitive advantage. And this could be some very real competitive advantage, right? Whether it is in terms of the kind of innovation and products and services that you can come up with and put in front of your clients, or whether it is around managing costs, managing your logistics, your supply chain, right, your employee and talent base, right? All these areas are getting impacted by this technology, right? The new disruptions that are happening, and the disruption cycle itself is shortening, right? So if you take too much of time, right, to understand and think through, right, and you use more traditional methods, then the danger is that you might have missed one entire wave, right? Wave. Of course, people talk about, okay, so what, right? I can miss the wave, but I'll get on to the next one, right? And I'll leapfrog. But then the question is, if you didn't really understand and capitalize on the previous wave, then how are you confident that you'll do it to the next wave, right? So it's a bit of that running on the treadmill kind of a syndrome. You got to keep running and you got to move fast, even to stay at the same pace. So my hypothesis is just the pace of change and disruption is resulting in a little bit of that mind shift happening, right? So clients want to say, what can I do now? I know that this is new technology, this is new stuff, and maybe it is not even mature and people have understood it clearly, but can I be the first to do that? Can I be disruptive, right? Yeah.
How healthy is it in the long run, right? So basically they're doing this. I understand the FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, and probably they are, uh, especially if they miss, they have to answer to their board saying that, you know what, we knew that this was happening, but in the long run, for the entire ecosystem of, industries digitizing their processes and then intelligently digitizing their processes, how healthy is it to keep on doing this? Do you encourage this to your clients, or do you say, you know what, let's sit down? I don't think we should get. How do you approach that?
I think it's dependent on context to some extent, right? Because if you have a very solid business model with a good amount of protection, entry barriers, moats, as they call it, right? And therefore, you are already differentiated in terms of what you do, the products and services that you offer. Then you are not looking for the next new thing, right? To continue to stay relevant and differentiated. But you also notice that not all business models are along those lines, right? Especially in the last 10 years, with the burgeoning of the digital economy and the Internet of Things and so on, right? The number of business models that are in existence today that capitalize on, am I on the latest from a technology, from an innovation standpoint, and can I quickly ride that hype cycle or the maturity cycle and then move on to the next thing? That has increased significantly. So if you're a company which is that kind of a space where you need the technology disruption to stay relevant, then you just have to go with it, right? So in some sense, I would say that it's not a question of, I mean, healthy and unhealthy. You can look at it from multiple perspectives, right? You can look at it from a shareholder standpoint. You can look at it from an employee standpoint. You can look at it from a technology standpoint, right? All of those things. But there is also then a questions of relevance, right? Is this something that is necessary? Is it relevant for what I'm doing? I think that might be driving the action a lot more than whether it is healthy, right? I think the healthy part is important. I think obviously most organizations talk about a foot in today and a foot in tomorrow. And a foot in tomorrow, I mean, there are industries, pharma industry, for example, that the typical life cycle of a new product introduction, right, drug discovery processes can take a very, very long amount of time. But even in those spaces, you now see, right, the technology disruption. Image analytics is a fairly big play, right, in new drug discovery. I mean, latest models around protein folding, for example, right? About AlphaFold, right? These are super important in the scheme of things today. So everybody is trying to, even ones with traditionally very long cycles, they are looking at how we can shorten the cycles. So I guess, it's about, it's an ever-changing, the VUCA world, as they call it. So I guess a little bit of this fast-paced change is inevitable.
Fantastic. Can you help us now? Over our conversation, I've realized there are several factors that are playing a role in terms of deciding whether we should prioritize innovation over, the existing immediate need, or sometimes there is needs. I think there is no black and white answer for it. There is especially with considering, as you mentioned, backup mechanisms that exist today. There might be some times where you can prioritize innovation over immediate impact and this thing. So is there some kind of a framework that LatentView uses, or this thing, when setting expectations with the client, and then kind of prioritizing innovation over immediate KRAs, or prioritizing immediate KRAs over this thing? If you can help us understand a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk about a couple of things, right, that we do today, which we have found to be fairly practical and sensible, right, in terms of having conversations with clients. So for ongoing engagements, where we are working with a stakeholder, we have mechanisms like the monthly business review and the quarterly business review that focus on the initiatives that are currently in play and what is the result and the impact of those initiatives, right? So, which means that every month you look back at, okay, what were we trying to do with the analytics initiative, and what kind of metric were we trying to impact, what decision processes did we make a difference to that, right? And there's a bit of that look back that we do in every monthly and quarterly business review to say that, okay, here is how much we were able to move the needle on the metrics that were in question. That were the focus, right, of the last quarter, for example, right? So we spend time on that, and I think that is important, right? Because only if you have that understanding, then you can actually look at what next. So I think that's important. But what we also do in the very same MBRs and QBRs is to table a few new ideas and innovations, right? In every such meeting, we say that, okay, here are 2 things that you should be considering, right? Here are 3 things that you can look at as initiatives for the next quarter or for the next year, right? If you can find a way to squeeze it into your roadmap of initiatives. And typically, those new things could have different kind of flavors. It could be about extending an initiative into new geographies or products or markets, as the case may be. It could be a new algorithmic approach to solving a problem that they have already solved, but which can be more effective. It could be a completely new technology disruption, right? Like Gen AI, for example, right? I mean, you have been doing something. Can you overlay Gen AI, right? Or can you incorporate large language models in improving the efficiency of what you're doing, right? Or the effectiveness of what you're doing. So we continue to table ideas like that. And we spend equal measure of time. So it's typically like 50-50, right? Half the time goes into a look back and half the time look at, okay, what next, right? And I think that as a mechanism has been serving us very well. In fact, we conduct a survey with our clients every quarter, right, to understand how are we doing, right? We call this the voice of customer survey, and we get very formal feedback from every one of the stakeholders that we are interacting with. And one of the very important questions that we ask them is like, do you see us as an execution partner? Do you see us as a thought partner and a knowledge partner? Or do you see us as a consulting partner, right? Meaning that a consulting partner is one where even if you're not even clear about the question itself, right? If you're fuzzy in your mind, or if you're asking very high level questions like, what is the next thing I should be worried about or that I should be capitalizing on? Do they come to us, right? And it's heartening to note that in the last 6 quarters, right, we have been trending up on those questions, right, where clients are saying that increasingly we see you bring those ideas to the table. And that is important. Not that they will always take it and then say, no, let's run with it in the next quarter itself. But it's food for thought, right? It's new stuff that is being tabled, right? So this is one very important mechanism that we have, the QBR, MBR, right, and the voice of customer survey. The other construct that we have internally is the service delivery excellence construct, right? This is a horizontal team that works with all of our industry verticals, all of our project engagement. In fact, they run the voice of customer survey that I talked about. But what they're also doing is that for all the pieces of work that we're doing, they're continuously evaluating which are the top ones that are coming up, right? In terms of innovativeness, in terms of new impact, in terms of doing things in a manner, right, that might make sense. And they keep surfacing it, right, to the leadership team. These are the ones that are also then encapsulated as ideas and innovations that we can take into our MBRs and QBRs. So we have a formal construct like that, which is goaled around how do we surface all the best work that is happening, right, within the organization and new ideas that people are trying out. And we have enabled that with the appropriate technology support as well, right, in terms of using a Confluence or a C-Suite, for example, so that there is knowledge dissemination happening internally within the organization, and we can use the very same tools to have conversations with the clients. So these two are working pretty well for us, and we are able to capitalize on them, right, to put good ideas in front of the clients all the time.
Yeah, no, I think the voice of customer survey sounds like a very interesting framework to follow, right? I think not just in the context of understanding innovation versus immediate short-term KRAs, but at the same time in setting up expectations in a lot of ways that it's very interesting. Considering this, can you walk us through an example? Like, because we have talked about it at a very strategic level, just to help our audience kind of understand, right? What exactly does this mean? Can you walk us through a previous example that you faced this year? Obviously, you don't have to mention any names, but just so that we understand, this is how the conversation started from their end, from the client end. This is where we stepped in and kind of set the expectations right. This is how we balanced innovation and short-term KRAs or long-term KRAs. And then this is how we ended up completing the project. So maybe if you can help us a little bit deep dive into it.
Sure, yeah. I can give the example of devices manufacturer, right, that we have been working with. They are one of the largest, right, in the printers and peripherals and laptops space, right? And the problem statement that they originally came to us with was a forecasting kind of a problem, right? Meaning that can I forecast what will be the different demand for the different parts that go into all these devices, right? And interestingly, like that's what we were focused on initially, right? Can we build good demand forecasting models based on past data to look at when do you need any of these components and parts? But obviously, this was really focused around their maintenance services, meaning that I sell the device, but I also am responsible for maintaining it, right? There is an AMC, especially with large B2B kind of clients who are buying thousands of these devices from you, right? The company has the responsibility to maintain them as well, right? Interestingly, what we were able to then look at as a movement from a forecasting related metrics, right? Mean average percentage error, for example, right? I'm able to come up with good forecast for every component. That morphed into a very different kind of a project where we said that are we able to really anticipate when the product might actually fail? Because in some sense, the forecast was really looking at like once the device has failed, how do I make sure that I have the part available so that I can take care of, right, the client problem, right, in the shortest possible time. Whereas if you peel the onion, what you really want to do is to make sure that the device doesn't even fail, right? Or you are able to go and make an intervention before the device fails because you know that the device is going to fail, right? So that is what the project eventually moved into, right? In the sense that we started looking at, okay, are there enough data points available from all of the sensors and the instrumentation that they have done in this device that will help us predict the possibility that a particular component is going to go down, right? Now, for example, the motherboard in a laptop going down, is actually triggered very much by other aspects. Is the battery working fine, for example, right? Is the fan and the heat dissipation unit working fine, for example? And you have sensors and instrumentation on these devices, right? That tells you, okay, if the fan starts fluttering, for example, right, and it's not performing well, then you know that something is going to happen to the motherboard, right? Whatever, 2 weeks down the line or a month down the line, right? So you can actually build good ML models that look at data that comes from all of these sensors. So in some sense, that identification of what might be a more underlying problem or identifying what might be a more impactful problem to solve for, right, for the client, that started receiving more prominence within the client organization based on all the constructs and stuff that we talked about. So we were able to go and table some good ideas to them, saying that, okay, you can actually build models using this algorithmic approach, right, which tells you that, okay, I'll predict something, and even before the device fails, I can go and take care of it, right? Either educate the company, the client, saying that, okay, you're probably not using the device or the equipment in the right fashion, and these are the changes that we recommend, or to fix it, right, and prevent the problem from happening in the first place itself. So, I mean, this obviously involved interaction between not only the account team and the industry team, but also the SD construct that I talked about, looking at how can you bring some algorithms that are relevant in this kind of a context. We had done very similar work in the automotive space with one of the large luxury German car manufacturers, right, where the car is instrumented. And the problem they came to us was like, I mean, we are having very high warranty claims on certain parts. Can we find out what is causing? Because we think that the part should work for 10 years, but it was failing in 6 years itself, or 6 years, 7 years itself, right? So we did very similar work. So we were able to borrow those ideas and constructs and bring it into the context of this device manufacturer. So I'm just giving it as an example because it's not just about like looking what is the new algorithm that is there, but also going back and looking at what have we done, right? And is it relevant? Is it applicable in a different context? So it's a combination of many things coming together that made it possible.
Fantastic. I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that, I mean, I just want to summarize kind of the conversation we have, right? Especially when it comes to tech innovations and setting client expectations, right? It shouldn't be that we always should look at the problem statement. There is a gray area, is what I'm thinking. But at the end, in the end, what matters is the KRA. So eventually you will kind of sit down on the table and try to understand what are some of the immediate, problem statements that we're looking to solve. And based on that, probably the client will also then kind of, set their expectations internally and then communicate it to you. But it has been a great conversation, Rajan. Any closing thoughts?
This is, I mean, the one thing that we keep hearing from clients is like, even if you have the best analytics and the best decision-making frameworks and the mechanisms, at the end of the day, if people don't use them, then all of that goes to waste, right? So today, what I'm seeing is increasingly analytics is also not about the latest innovation and technology or the algorithms or the methods, but there is also a change management angle, right? And then there's a saying, right? I mean, nothing succeeds like success, which means that you need to show real progress on the metrics that matter, on the KRAs that matter, right? So you cannot be doing innovation and ideation in an ivory tower, which is completely like divorce from what is happening on the ground level. That balance that we talked about, right, in this conversation, I think that is super important. But within that context, of course, given the kind of the general excitement that is there today in comparison to even say a year ago or 18 months back, I think it's a great environment and a climate for figuring out how can you leverage some of the things that are available. It's not that these technologies are completely new either. I mean, large language models have been around for some time. Of course, they have taken different avatars, right, in the last several years. But what is changing now is the general excitement, right? I talked about the democratization through the ChatGPT, for example. I think it's a great environment and context. So clients can look at how do you make use of some of these things to drive real action, right? From a P&L standpoint, right? For the metrics that matter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rajan, for your time. We are really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kashyap. Nice catching up with you as always.